All right. Well, thank you all for taking some time to join us today. We've got a very special track for you guys today for MSP Experience on the business track side of things. Joined with Luis Alvarez, we're going to be discussing public cloud and really how you guys are able to take advantage of some of the offerings there. So without further ado, I am Mason Fox. I am our Director of Sales here at Axient. And I am joined here with Luis Alvarez from Alvarez Technology. Luis, you want to kind of give a brief intro about yourself, a little bit about Alvarez Technology?
Happy to, Mason. So Alvarez Technology Group is a managed security services provider based in Central California. For those of you that don't know California well, we're a little south of San Jose and north of Santa Barbara. And we primarily serve, that area of California. We have clients all over Northern and Southern California, but largely our customer base is in the Central California area. And it's a lot of rural businesses, a lot of agriculture, hospitality, those sorts of things. But we've been around for 21 years, started as a traditional VAR and moved on to managed services. I want to thank one of the first companies that dipped their toes in that flat fee, all you can eat business model in I think 2007, and haven't stopped since. And about 5 years ago, we added a bunch of cybersecurity offerings to our portfolio and created a SOC with a chief security officer and a team of people who take care of our clients' cybersecurity needs. And for us, by the way, we look at backup of all sorts of things as part of that security portfolio. We don't look at it as just something that is part of the base of our offering. It's an important thing that you need to provide your clients, and so we take it very seriously.
Well, Luis, we appreciate you joining us here today. You've been a long-time Axient partner. I think I was looking through our database, and I think I saw you join prior to 2010. So you've been along the ride for quite a long time and really seen quite a bit of changes here. Diving into things, really what made us kind of have this talk track today is we had a survey that we sent out to around 250 of our partners and really wanted to understand how partners are utilizing public cloud like Azure and that, how they're able to back those up. And we were able to find out that 98% of our partners, surveyed are currently using Azure deployments, which is awesome. And kind of what we expected to see with the trends of everything kind of moving towards the cloud. But conversely to that, we were a little bit surprised to see only 47% are actually backing up data from Azure. And so there's a lot of different reasons why that might be, but major opportunity here and kind of major gap in kind of what we see versus what our customers are actually seeing and doing. So this is kind of what drove us to kind of have this conversation with Luis today and really kind of dive into how you're utilizing Azure and really kind of being successful with it. When we looked at MSPs, we really kind of found three different profiles when it came to public clouds like Azure. You had the ones that were really, not engaged whatsoever, really not pushing it. And that can come from a multitude of different reasons, right? They might not have the bandwidth, from resources internally to go and kind of spend time on projects like that. They might have their own data centers where they're really just kind of pushing things there and really kind of steadfast and kind of wanting to maintain that data center, think it's the most efficient thing and best thing for them. Or they might just not have the proper education on the Azure deployments and what is capable and where they can be successful there. The second profile is we kind of see the people that are somewhat pushing it, right? They're probably only doing it when their customers are really asking for it. They understand it, but again, they have all sorts of different deployments out there and they're really not actively pushing it, right? And then we've got customers like you, Luis, who really have fully adopted that cloud environment and really kind of have been doing it for quite some time, actively pushing your customers to the cloud. And it might not be 100% for different use cases, but every opportunity you can, you're really kind of pushing those customers into that cloud environment. And again, that's kind of why we brought you on today, is really kind of wanting to dig into your experience and how you've been so successful doing that. Part of this is what's driving people to have backups from Azure, right? Everyone thinks about Microsoft and they're this massive, amazing company, right? And they really do have an incredible offering. And I think it's pretty impossible these days to not use some of their products. So everyone's working with Microsoft. Everyone's very familiar with them. And most people probably are not entirely familiar with this clause in their ULA, right? That states essentially, yes, we have your data, we are backing it up, but we're not liable for that data and any backups that occur in there. So Luis, you obviously use Microsoft quite a bit and you're a big Azure partner. How does this impact how you guys kind of look at backing up from Azure and how you kind of discuss this with your clients?
It's a great question. And really, it speaks to the fact that there is this false sense of security that comes with cloud deployments, whether it's Azure or Microsoft 365 or Google's what I forget what they changed G Suite to now, but any hosted environment. Whenever we subscribe to those, we kind of naturally assume, hey, my data is protected somehow. And when you dig into it, like you guys did and presented here in the slide, the reality is that Microsoft is saying, look, we guarantee uptime. That is it. So if it goes down, that's on us. If your data gets corrupted, deleted, otherwise messed up, that's on you. We're not responsible for that. And that holds true across all major hosting platforms. And if you look at companies outside of Microsoft like Salesforce or some of those other hosting companies, they are very explicit in how they do things. And Microsoft kind of leaves it up to you, the end user, in our case, the MSP, to figure out how you're going to protect that data. They offer their own backup solution, but there's a lot of others out there, including Axiat. But when in the slide earlier when you said less than 50% of MSPs are backing up Azure, it speaks to that kind of level of misunderstanding of what the responsibility is of the hosting company, in this case Microsoft. And it's really important for us to understand what those limitations are and communicate those to our clients, so that when you present a backup offer, whether you bundle it with your offering or as a separate entity, they understand that it's a requirement, just like if they had an on-prem server that needed to be backed up.
And that's exactly right. And that's what we see too. Microsoft guarantees their uptime, but they're not responsible for maintaining the data inside that environment. That responsibility falls on whoever's using it. And that is, in this case, you guys, the MSP. And that, again, it falls on you guys to educate your clients as to why there needs to be backups, because everyone, even end clients, are very familiar with Microsoft, right? Big company, and they think it might be very secure there. But again, it's up to you guys to kind of educate them on why those extra backups are needed. Luis, you've been around for a long time as an MSP. You've had the on-prem appliance backup versions, and now you've kind of switched and migrated more towards the cloud backup side of things. What was that kind of switching point for you, and what kind of drove that?
Well, we have to go all the way back to Microsoft's first really cloud offering, which was the really sexy named Business Productivity Online Suite, or BPOS. And that was their first foray into hosted Exchange. And before Microsoft decided to take the plunge, there was a lot of other companies that offered hosted Exchange. Essentially, they were taking Exchange servers and letting you access them remotely. Not really, a groundbreaking change, since that capability was built into Exchange. But Microsoft saw that there was this desire for a hosted product, so they jumped on with BPOS. And we saw that was a trend that was only going to continue. So we, adopted it, had many of our clients adopt BPOS when it came time for them to decide whether they were going to upgrade their on-prem Exchange servers, or maybe they were, at the time, a lot of them were using a website's, email pop server that was fine, but then they started getting all sorts of spam, and it was those early days of viruses being sent via email. So we needed to really enhance the protection, and BPOS offered that capability. It was really kludgy and hard to work with early on, but obviously, a decade later, we're now on an M365 platform that's rock solid. But as Microsoft started offering all of these hosted services and Azure came in, we decided that it made a lot of sense where possible to migrate our clients out of the data center business. They were, taking up a lot of real estate. In most cases, they were, the servers themselves, the physical servers weren't in very protected areas. You started to see a lot of folks who were moving multiple offices and having to try to connect up via VPNs back to a central data repository. And we started looking at Azure as a solution for that. So that only accelerated in 2020 during the early days of the pandemic, when all of a sudden people were trying to work from home and access information across very, very small pipes going into their office. And so we started working with our clients to develop a path forward to get them to the cloud where possible. Again, in some cases, like I mentioned earlier, we're in a fairly rural area in some parts of the Central Coast of California. So, a lot of farms that are out in the middle of nowhere, or wine growing regions. So they don't have the luxury of having high-speed internet, and so it doesn't make sense there to migrate them. But where possible, we've done it, and it's part of a larger strategy that takes into account whatever line of business applications are running. Are those able to be hosted someplace? So, a lot of companies that used to do line of business applications on servers on-prem have moved on to host them themselves. And so as those workloads came off the servers, then we started asking ourselves, well, we have, Microsoft 365 for email and collaboration and other functionality. We've moved the line of business apps off the server. We can, use SharePoint and OneDrive to store data. What is really the purpose of having a physical server anymore, other than Active Directory? And we can move that workload into an Azure VM, or directly into Azure AD, or Entra ID now, as they changed the word or the title. But that really has been kind of where we have been for a few years now. We lead cloud first, and then default to on-prem if that's not possible.
And Luis, you guys have, again, had this transition going for quite a while, and you guys are predominantly cloud-based now. When you first started having those conversations with your clients and made that decision that you wanted to move things to the cloud where possible, what do those conversations look like? Were they easy to have with your clients, or did it take a lot of explaining and convincing to move them into the cloud?
Well, early on, whenever you have a new technology like this, or a new platform that you want your clients to adopt, it takes a lot of education. They're not going to jump on board because you tell them to. It's rare. I wish I had more of those clients, but the vast majority of them are very inquisitive and want to know, why should they make this move from a CapEx world where they can spend it one time and be done with it, as opposed to, well, now I'm on the hook on a subscription for the rest of my life. Does that make sense? So you have to start showing them the return on investment, the ROI, why that makes sense, the fact that you don't have to worry about version upgrades, or those sorts of things that you typically have to do when you buy licenses, and they become obsolete, and you then have to do this big forklift migration to the next latest and greatest operating system and application. And so we learned to have those conversations with clients. Early on, we had to overcome the security conversation. There was a perceived sense of insecurity when it came to the cloud. Folks thought, well, at least if it's in my data center or in my data closet, I can lock it. It's behind a door, and I know where it's at, and I can protect it. But if I put it in the cloud, anybody can get to it. And so we had to understand what the security protocols were, and we convince our clients that, no, this is a much more secure environment. I would trust Microsoft's security enablement versus, the stuff that you can do in your own data center with limited resources. So let's have that conversation and explain to them what the benefits are. But it really is one of those things where it's a lot about educating them and showing them why it's the best solution for them.
Well, and I imagine those conversations are much easier now today than they were when you guys first got started as the cloud gets more widely kind of spread and more widely adopted. But again, you guys have been at this for some time. Is there any kind of tips or tricks that you found really kind of gets that point across through clients, or is it just kind of education depending on the client and their vertical and their business?
I think that the first thing you need to do is think of it as a larger strategy. This isn't a hey, you have a server in your office, let's move it to the cloud. That's not going to get you anywhere usually. More, you need to stop and say, hey, let's get you to a place where 5 years from now you're going to be able to scale or shrink relatively easily, as opposed to making a big investment in hardware that may be obsolete within a couple of years. And then you find yourself going through the same process, rinsing and repeating. And you need to really sit down and have that conversation with your clients. Like, where are they going? Where are their like I said, where are their line of business applications going? If they're, largely an office environment where they use maybe QuickBooks and they use, a couple of other apps, but everything else is just, Office and the M365 suite. That's a really easy conversation to have. If they have a lot of other line of business or MRP manufacturing applications, then you need to involve their other vendors so that you can have a richer, fuller conversation. But what we find is that clients love to have that conversation. They really love the fact that you care about them enough to think about their, what their future looks like and making the right decisions, as opposed to trying to get them to just spend a lot of money because it's time for the refresh. Let's do that $100,000 forklift upgrade that we do every 4 or 5 years. You want to get away from that and really start preaching the benefits of having a long-term strategy that includes cloud as at the center.
Yeah, I mean, again, making it about them and their business and showing them the big picture of where things are headed, that certainly has to make things a lot easier. Liz, you mentioned compliance earlier, and compliance seems to be a hot topic, especially when it comes to Azure, because there's, again, a lot of misunderstanding and just unknown when it comes to cloud environments. How's your experience been so far with meeting compliance for your customers, and how do those conversations look?
It's a lot easier in Azure than it is on-prem, quite frankly, because you have access to a number of tools and services, either directly from Microsoft or from third parties, that aren't going to be available typically on an on-prem environment. Things like multi-factor authentication, all the way to identity management, risk management, all of these platforms that integrate so closely into cloud-based platforms, because those companies are thinking cloud first as well. They have limited, even large companies have to make decisions where they're going to invest their R&D dollars. And when they see the direction, the trends, they see the cloud is the direction that everybody's going to go. So they're not going to spend, given the option to spend money in the cloud or on-prem, they're going to spend it to, enhance and develop their cloud solutions. And our clients see this too. It's funny, the transition over the last 10 years has been one where we would initiate the cloud conversation with clients, but now, as we talk to prospects, they're asking us, hey, can you help us migrate to the cloud? My current provider really is resisting. We had one customer that we brought on earlier this year that was still running, an Exchange server on-prem, which wasn't patched, by the way, and needed some serious TLC before we were able to move them off to M365. But it was because the MSP wasn't comfortable in the cloud. And so because he was not, or she was not, they didn't want to move the client. They wanted to hold on to that. And that's doing your client a disservice, because it really is in their best interest. We had, prior to the pandemic here in Central California, if you remember, about 6-7 years ago, we had a series of really devastating fires. And those fires have not abated. Fortunately, this year we've had a lot of rain, and we don't expect a bad fire season. But every year we worry about fire season because not only does it cause a lot of damage, it's also very disruptive. And during that particular fire season, a lot of roads were closed. A lot of shelter in place orders were given by the fire services, telling people don't go to the office, don't leave your home. But they had to work, and they realized that everything was sitting in the office. In the office, the power went off because PG&E turned off the power, and they couldn't get to those things. So that led to a lot of conversations of how can we prevent this from happening? How can we create a more resilient environment? And that always starts with cloud. And so for us, that conversation is now one that's much easier to have. It's still a lot of education that needs to take place about what you can and can't do. But in terms of compliance, it's a much easier platform to make sure that you check all the boxes when it comes to either a cybersecurity framework that you're supposed to adhere to, or satisfying a cyber insurance carrier that you're doing all the right things.
Yeah, I mean, compliance is one of those things that keeps MSPs up at night, right? And we know Microsoft is incredibly good at their security side of things and helping MSPs meet that compliance side. Having and hosting that data yourselves, or you're having your customers hosting that themselves, it's just a very challenging thing, especially as compliance needs keep adopting and changing. As again, we have more compliance coming down the road. And even the ones that are there are always evolving and changing as the world kind of evolves around it. So again, it makes it much, much easier to manage that through Microsoft, we found. Two main things that I know people on here are probably dying to talk about. One is pricing. And before we get into pricing and how you specifically do it, again, Microsoft offers their own native backup within Azure. Why have you opted to do a third-party backup instead of utilizing that?
A couple of reasons. First off, the native backup offering from Microsoft is okay, but it's not very flexible. It's not necessarily multi-tenant and easy to manage. It's each tenant has to have its own environment. So if you want to manage that backup solution, for example, you have to go into that tenant and see what's going on, and the alerting isn't great. And when you have to restore, it's not a simple process. It's a little bit difficult. We've been using, as you pointed out, Xperience solutions for over a decade now, and our guys are really comfortable with how it works, and we've used it on-prem forever. So the cloud-based services of X360 Recover is exactly the same. It looks the same, feels the same, acts the same. So our guys don't need to be retrained. They don't need to go to multiple portals to do things. And we've already integrated the alerting and the monitoring and the management into our day-to-day SOC work. So it's really easy when we spin up a new Azure VM to just say, hey, we're going to be doing the Xperience solution for backup, rather than doing anything different. Because when we do have to restore, it's exactly the same way that their guys know how to restore. They don't have to go back and say, oh, well, this is Microsoft backup, we have to do a different thing, or we have to spin it up a different way. And we can do things like do disaster recovery tests, spin up VMs in a DR test for those clients who are in maybe financial services or in healthcare that require annual DR tests to show that they can recover should their primary environments not be available. And it's hard to do that without a significant investment of time and effort in the Microsoft backup space.
Well, and you kind of hit the nail on the head for kind of the main reasons why we see MSPs doing that, right? One, you don't have to train your techs on multiple solutions. If you're using the on-prem appliances, it's the exact same offering, exact same feel. So it's just one solution, makes it much easier to have your processes really dialed in. And when things go wrong, you don't have to try to scramble to figure out what exactly that reason is, or who to reach out to, or who you're working with, and everyone's trained on the same solution. But two, again, it just makes it that much easier to meet compliance needs and kind of continue along all those trends. So appreciate you sharing that. And again, Luis, we're running a little bit light on time, but I want to make sure, because what is probably hot on everyone's mind is, how do we price this, right? And how do we price it in a way that is, one, acceptable to customers and that is not, hard to manage?
Sure. So, Azure, in the early days, Azure pricing was something of a hit or miss experiment. And there were many times when we would miss, and we, configure an environment and tell our client, well, this is the range that it's going to cost on a monthly basis. And we, miss it by quite a bit. But since then, current pricing calculators, Microsoft's own calculator, or if you use a distributor like a Pax8 or an Ingram Micro or TD Synnex, they all have teams that can help you price the solution almost, within cents of what it's going to be on an ongoing basis. So, you use that as the foundation, and then you start adding your services on top of it. So we don't sell Azure as a standalone service. We sell it packaged with backup, with our own monitoring and management services. For many of our existing managed services clients or managed security services clients, we just add that to their existing agreement, and they want us to manage it. They want us to maintain it. And backup is built in. So we know what the pricing is for the actual workloads, the VMs, and other things that we're going to be doing in Azure. And then we know what the backup is going to cost and how that's going to work. So we bundle it all into one price that we present to clients. And we let them know, by the way, there are, Microsoft's own pricing model says that they reserve the right to change things. So this could go up, might go down. And there might be times when you use it really heavily, like let's say you have our winery clients, for example, probably 6 months out of the year, they're very light users, but then during harvest and production, they are, slamming that server like nobody's business. And so their price will fluctuate, but we build that into the pricing calculator working with our distributors so that we can present that to clients. Either, hey, we can smooth this out and give you a flat fee across the entire year so that you're more comfortable and budgeting that, or we can do variable costs so it's lower during the off season and higher during the production and harvest, and we leave it to them.
Well, and again, it really comes down to that conversation you're having with them, right? And what they're comfortable with and what type of business they have and what kind of variability they have throughout the year. But it is really nice having those calculators from those third parties that you can use to really kind of dial in what those egress costs and what most people would think of as those, very variable costs that make it difficult to price these. Again, if you can kind of average that out or have a good understanding of their business, makes it a lot easier to kind of build that in and have it be just like the normal backup where it's built in and doesn't change on a variable basis. But again, if you have those that have high variability, you can have that conversation and again, pass those through as you see fit. That's, I'm sure, very helpful for a lot of people here, Luis.
Well, good. I'm glad. I would, urge everyone, if you haven't jumped on the Azure bandwagon, don't be afraid of it. It's really easy. Microsoft has made it so much easier for MSPs to embrace Azure. We looked at AWS, but it was just a much more complicated beast for us. And as a Microsoft shop, it was a really easy move to go from on-prem to Azure.
Well, Luis, again, really appreciate all the insights and everything you've shared with us today. We've got about a minute left to wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of leave the audience with?
Well, if you do make the leap into Azure, take a look at their virtual desktops. And I think that that's going to be a really, really big thing. We're seeing a lot of clients looking for that kind of solution because of the fact that we're now, a hybrid workforce with a lot of remote workers, and you want to manage access in a much more secure way. And virtual desktops, I think, are going to be a really big solution to resolve that compliance need for a lot of those customers. So check it out.
Yeah, work from home is not going anywhere anytime soon. Well, Luis, thank you again very much for your time. And again, thank you everyone else for joining us today. If you want to head back to the main stage, up next is our CTO, Kevin Hoffman, joined by a panel of MSPs to talk about how to integrate real automation into your business. So check that one out. And again, thank you all for your time today.
Take care.
Thank you.